Okay, so welcome again to everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Community Checkbox training. You guys, I've been looking at your entries, and so far so good. We'll be reaching out to you, either Priya or myself, and setting up times on Fridays to maybe go through a few of your entries with you. But thank you for what you've done so far. And now that you're getting into the implementation part where you guys have already uploaded your logic models and began completing some other required documents, we're moving into another phase of the SPIF. And so we wanted to touch base and make sure you know how to continue entering your data or your accomplishments into the community checkbox. So with that being said, I'm going to move forward here. Some of these slides you've seen before, so I'll kind of just go through them. I not really want to talk about each of them, but I've added some new ones for you. And so we all know the importance of evaluation, and what we're doing this after each training you have with the KPC team to make sure that you are able to tell your full story. So we're just repeating a lot of the things that were said and adding a little bit new on as we go. You guys already know where to enter the data, so we'll just skip this one. And you also know that we're responsible for entering data on Fridays. And for some reason, my screen wouldn't advance. So here we go. This you already know where to get to the community checkbox. I will say that by the end of next week, this will look a little bit different, but you'll get lots of warnings and some additional training. So, but this is where we go now to get to the community checkbox. And because I'm working remotely, things are working a little different. Just one second. There we go. As I said, we're going to click through a couple of screens here. So while I'm clicking through, I would like to know, is there anybody who's had any problems getting into the community checkbox so far, or do you have any questions that maybe I can address as we go along? If any of those things are occurring, you can type in the chat, and Chad will help me manage the chat. But this is where we're going to start. What do I document? You've already entered some assessment and capacity building accomplishments. So your coalition or the factors that you're going to address in your community, then you've been in the assessment and the capacity building portion. So we want to make sure that you have been implementation and evaluation. I will say that all of these, they don't happen when the training is occurring. These things are happening throughout the whole process of the grant. So even though we're talking today about planning, implementation, and evaluation, you could still be doing some things as far as related to assessment or capacity building. So these things are all, this is an ongoing process. So one of the things I wanted to note related to what I just shared with you is that even though we're in this training, or the training that you received even a couple of weeks ago was about implementation, planning, implementation, and evaluation, when you enter your accomplishment in the community checkbox, you're not entering it based on the process that you're in as far as the training is concerned. You're entering the information related to what you are doing. So even though we're talking about planning, implementation, and evaluation, you could be entering something that's an assessment accomplishment, or you could be entering an accomplishment as it relates to capacity. And that's what you'll check under SPIF phase. And we'll get to the actual PCB question. So any questions about that? And I tried to say it a couple of different ways. So be sure and ask questions as we go. And let me know if I'm not clear. Simple questions to ask yourself. I hope you guys have used this as a guide. I didn't really see a lot of capacity building or assessment entries in the community checkbox. So if you like, when we reach out to you, we can go through these questions and maybe ask you a few questions about some of the things that you've done so that we're making sure that we capture all of the data. But this is a great guide to use when you're considering, hey, it's what I've done, something that needs to go into the community checkbox. Now here's a slide that you just saw in your previous training, and I just want to reiterate that now that you're in the planning, implementation, and evaluation phase, you're going to be using your logic model. You're going to be using not only the logic model, but other required documents to help you determine what needs to be captured in the checkbox. So one of the things that you'll be capturing is from the how or what strategies you'll be implementing. You'll be, when you select implementation from the SPIF phase question, you'll get a list of strategies. And so that will be something, if you're implementing a strategy in your community, that's when you'll know you want to place something in the community checkbox. I'm sorry, an accomplishment in the community checkbox. The other key thing is if you are addressing action steps. You said that you are going to meet with the superintendent in your community, or you're going to meet with a new coalition in your community, or you're going to meet with somebody at the government level in your community. Whatever your action steps are, you're going, when those steps have been completed, then you're going to enter that information into the community checkbox. So those are all accomplishments. Another place which I mentioned earlier, if you go through and look at your capacity building form and any of your other required documents, there are usually steps that you said you wanted to reach, or goals that you wanted to reach in those capacity building forms or other required forms. And those are things that once they have been accomplished, you want to place them in the community checkbox. So you have a couple of different ways to kind of do a double check of what needs to be entered in the checkbox. And you all are familiar with this, so I won't go through that. And don't forget that if you are working with other organizations or other communities, community coalitions in your community, that you are able to enter that information in the checkbox. We're also capturing other counties or zip codes, which most of you are small enough that it's probably the same. So you don't have to worry too much about that. And then the description. The description helps us to provide the evaluation in the checkbox. So now you're going to be getting into maybe media campaigns such as It Matters, or if you're posting information on social media. It doesn't matter what the accomplishment is, you'll always stick to this protocol. And anytime you have a question about how to enter a description, please just reach out to us and let us know. My mouse doesn't. And again, we want you to tell your whole story. It should be quite a few first-time activities, since this will be the first time that you'll be, your planning group if you're getting ready to implement new strategies in your community, you should have quite a few first-time activities when you're meeting new people or sharing information for the first time. That's, of course, going to be a first-time activity, so we want to make sure we cover that. And now we're going to be moving away from, if you were addressing, if whatever it was you were addressing before you identified based on the data with Greenbush, that was a broader outcomes. Now you've narrowed down your outcomes because you have the data. So now you're going to be answering a more specific question as it relates to your outcomes, because you've completed your action plan, or you're in the process of completing your action plan and your logic model, which I think they were already due. And then I think you guys already are aware of this. I kind of went through the entries, and you're answering this question great. But I do want to reiterate that just because you're in these phases right here, you still could be doing some activities under assessment and capacity, and that's how you answer the question, based on what the actual accomplishment is and not what phase you're actually being trained in. We talked about specific outcomes a moment ago. Now you have specific outcomes, and those specific outcomes that you address are indicated on your logic model. So now the question, I think I'm going to go back. Uh-oh. So now, once you begin implementing a strategy in your community, you'll be answering what SPIF phase does this activity primarily contribute to or support? In the past, if you selected assessment, capacity, planning, or even evaluation, you won't get a drop-down list or another set of questions. But when you select implementation, it will trigger another set of questions, and you'll answer those accordingly. So what specific outcomes? I'm sorry, we did talk about that. I'm going to go on to this one. So one of the drop-down questions will be, you'll be able to determine if this is a media and awareness strategy, if it's an environmental strategy, or if it's prevention education. Your funds don't cover prescription drug strategies, but if that's something that you're doing under another grant or other funding, you are able to go ahead and enter that accomplishment. But for the sake of today's training, we're talking about your opportunities to determine whether your strategy is a media and awareness, environmental strategy, or prevention education. And with that, when you select media awareness, you'll get this question. We're in the first gray box. When you select media awareness, you'll get a drop down, and you should be able to find the KDADS approved strategy in this list. If you find that the strategy you are implementing is not listed, please let your DECA specialist or myself know. We either need to add it, or we need to determine whether or not it's something that's funded through KDADS. So when you select media awareness, you'll get a particular list. When you select whether or not it's an environmental strategy, there is a separate list that will give you a drop down, and the same thing for prevention education. You'll get a separate drop down list of strategies. Any questions so far? Okay. So you guys have been doing a great job identifying your sectors as it relates to, you probably have just been answering. Was that a question? I just saw something flash.
No, that was just me typing notes, Phyllis. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. As it relates to your sectors, you've probably been answering or entering accomplishments based on who's active in your coalition. One of the things that people get kind of confused on, so let's say you're going to begin implementing a strategy in a school, and you've entered that particular accomplishment for the first time. Grant community, I'm just using you as an example, provided the Botman skills strategy to the 6th grade students at Northwest Middle School. All made up, but just to give you an example. And then you come to this question, which sectors were primarily involved? You would only answer that question as it relates to if someone from the business sector assisted you in implementing the Botman skills strategy at Northwest School. You aren't going to answer it based on if someone from the business sector is engaged in your coalition. So 2 separate things. So your questions are going to be directly related to what is going on in the accomplishment. Okay, and if there are no questions, I won't say that another way. I think I was pretty clear. The next question, the length of activity, I would encourage you to use the help question mark there, because it will give you specific ways to enter whether you did something for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And that is going to be directly related to if we're talking about implementing a strategy in a school, it's just going to be the hours that are related to what you did while you were at the school. So if the strategy was implemented at the school for 1 hour, if the presentation was 1 hour, then that's the amount of time we're looking for there, not the amount of time that it took you to gather the materials, the administrative part. So we're just looking specifically for what occurred while you were implementing or while you were addressing the specific accomplishment that you're describing. Okay. The next question is when I call you guys over the next couple of weeks, it'll probably be in the next couple of weeks. A lot of the conversation will be about how we're answering frequency. We already have the number 1 there as the default response for frequency, and that's because that's the most true. Frequency does not relate to, if you're posting something on social media, it doesn't relate to how many people saw it. It doesn't relate to how many times it was shared. Frequency only relates to how many times did you enter the particular social media post. So if you enter this, let's say the social media post is Grant County implemented the Botman skills, and this is what students learn as a result. So you entered that accomplishment 1 time, and that is what the frequency is going to be, 1 time. If for some reason, let's say that was a Facebook post, and now let's say you're going to enter the same information about the Botman skills strategy that was implemented in Grant County, and you're going to tell everyone what the result was. You did it in Facebook, now you're going to do it on Twitter. That's 2 separate entries. It should be 2 separate entries. If you choose to do a social media post, and let's say, using the example I just used, and you did it on Facebook and you did it on Twitter, then frequency is going to be 2. So just so you understand that frequency is the amount of times you did something, not how many times it was seen or shared, are duplicated once you provided the actual accomplishment. So I know I'm saying that several times, but it is the most challenged response that I get is where it relates to frequency. So you guys are going to be way ahead of the game. And here's another way that if I am going to call you in the next 2 weeks, but if you want to get ahead of the game, and I'm sorry I used Barber County as an example, and I didn't get a chance to ask you if that was okay, but trust me, you're not the only one, but this was an example. When we create the graphs, the number behind the data point, so you see implementation and you see 17, that 17 doesn't mean that they did something 17 times. 17 is related to how you answer frequency. So this particular example where it says 12, it looks like probably there were 12 persons who attended the meeting, but actually the meeting only happened one time. So that should be a 1, and then that would change, of course, when we graph it again. That would change that response to minus 12. So just want to let you know that when you're answering frequency, again, it's based on how many times you did something, not who attended, or not how many times something was seen or observed. And this is how frequency shows up on a graph, which you'll get some more of that when we do our evaluation workshop December 4th and 5th. Now that you are moving into the implementation stage, you'll also have more entries as it relates to media. Sorry, I was trying to see the screen. As it relates to media, we do have some helps only as it relates to newspaper circulation for both your daily and weekly circulations. When you are entering data based on media, usually if it's a billboard, the billboard company can give you an estimate of how many people are going to view the billboard, and that's the information you would use there. When it's a brochure or a flyer, something that you're physically handing out, of course, it's going to be the count of the number of things you handed out. That's kind of hard to do if you're at a fair. So the thing that I suggest people do, you count the number of flyers that you take with you when it's a large crowd, and then you recount what you have left. And that lets you know how many you've handed out. When it's a smaller crowd, you kind of have a little bit more control. Facebook, Kayla, I don't know if Kayla is still the person that you would contact at WSU, but definitely Chad can guide you to who can help you understand analytics as it relates to any social media platform. So whether it's Facebook, Twitter, and I'm the age I am, and that's my limit for what I know about social media. I'm sure there are lots of other platforms out there that you guys may be using, and they all have some type of way for you to determine how many persons saw your posts or how many persons shared your posts. You can even look at the demographics of some of the when you're looking at some of those analytic things when it comes to social media. So looking at those, and that is how we determine amount of media. There's some other examples there, and I'm sure that they're pretty straightforward about how you would count media for that. But in particular, as it relates to newspaper, we are asking that you use those particular links. And then another thing we want to share with you as it relates to media, media is not when you are announcing I'm just going to keep using Barber County as an example. Let's say you post on Facebook, Barber County Coalition is going to meet on, what's today, Tuesday. It's not October 3rd and 4th, as it says on that slide there. I just caught that. But let's say you're going to meet on Tuesday, November 27th, and we want everybody to come on out. That's a great way to use media to let people know what you're doing. But a media post, as it relates to what we want to capture in the community checkbox, is similar to the example I gave earlier. Barber County provided the Botman skills strategy at Northwest Middle School to sixth graders, and they talked about the prevalent use of alcohol, and these were the things that they taught about how to get kids not to use alcohol. So you stated what the issue is that you're addressing, and then you also stated some ways to prevent what it is you're trying to address. That is a media post. So any of the It Matters campaigns, and then any of the It Matters campaigns, and then using that particular example I gave. Do I see a question there? No, Chad is
just notes.
helpful. I'm sorry, Chad. I won't say, do I see a question, until you say, Dola, there's a question in the chat box.
Okay, deal. I'll let you know.
Yep. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think I've restated what it's already stated there enough. I will move to the next slide. On any other questions, you guys already have probably found out that there's a not applicable option. So I won't go over that, but we will talk about participant description. You should have been using participant description, especially during the assessment and capacity building phase, if you were engaging people in completing the survey. If you had coalition meetings where maybe you had new people join, if you had meetings in the community where you were sharing the information that you were going to be addressing, then you would need to have used participant description. And when you answer participant description, you are not including yourself. So of course, any number above 0 means that once you enter your answer here, then you're going to be using the participant description tab. And this is another slide that gives you it's a great reference for when to use participant description, how to gather the demographic information that you need. We try to give you levels, like under meetings, your coalition meetings. You can use your roster. There's some example rosters and resources on the workstation. If you haven't found them, just let us know. Community meetings, and then community events. Of course, the larger the event, the more difficult it is to narrow down those demographics. We still want you to use the participant description, and you would be selecting unknown. I'll show you that in a few moments. What you probably haven't used, of course, is services provided, implementation. Talked about that a little bit when we were talking about media. You can kind of determine how many persons you provided services to based on what you handed out. And then if we use our example, like the Botman skills in the 6th grade class, if there are 30 students, then the number of persons you served is going to be 30. Another way to get those demographics is through your relationships with the schools. And then when you do your, if there's a pre and post, you probably already collected that data through your relationship with Greenbush. So several ways to do that. And again, anytime you have questions about completing participant description, please reach out and let us know. This is the tab that once you complete the participant description information, you would select that tab, and here's the form. It absolutely yells at you when you don't answer it correctly, so I won't go over this too much, but I do want to reiterate the importance of gathering the information at every opportunity you have. We understand that when the event is a very large event, it's difficult to gather that information, but we do have unknown, even if it's a small event and you forgot, or you know, there are barriers to receiving the information. Counting the number of people is an easy thing to do that you serve. Using sign-in sheets is a great way to gather the information and let people self-identify. And then relationships in the schools or in smaller groups, people are usually pretty willing to work with you to gather this information. We'll talk a lot about graphs today because, again, we have the December 4th and 5th opportunity coming up, but I do want to help guide you to where your graphs are. So when you go to the landing page that you see an image of over here to your left, you want to go under View, select Graphs, and you'll see many, many more graphs than you see here. And I'm sorry, right now they're not in alphabetical order. Today, when I looked, you guys' graphs are on the bottom row, and you'll see, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I provided the image for your specific communities, but they're on the bottom row. They were the last ones I did. When you click on the actual folder, you will see graphs there based on questions that you've answered in the community checkbox. When we call you, that's one of the things we'll do, a call just like this. It'll be a web call, and I'll open up the graphs and show you your information and how, you know, how you're building your story. And again, we'll talk a great deal about that next week on the 4th and the 5th. But this is where you go to find your graphs. You guys, if it's something that you want to see, just shoot us a question, and we would be glad to help you. Right now, we're building graphs based on what we think you want to know and based on what we want to know. So we didn't quite use the 2 hours. I don't have the time. Oh my goodness. Well, I've given you and myself the gift of a couple of hours. That is the end of the presentation today. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have any ahas you want to share with us? Looks like Judy, are you talking? I see your release.
No, my screen just went black. I was bringing it back up.
Getting me excited. I thought I was going to be able to answer a question. Okay. All right. Well, you guys have been great. Again, your entries have been great. Keep up the good work. And any questions you have between now and the next time we talk, please be sure and reach out to us. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dola. You spoke quickly and very clearly, and there were no questions. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. Thanks for your help.
Yep, you bet.